And Wayne's online as well.
He's what?
He's online as well.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Oh, thank you. One of my favorites. You don't have 200 things to look on. It really wasn't. What I thought. Oh, wait a second. Okay, well, welcome everyone and call to order the study meeting of the West Valley City Council. It is February 28th. It is 4:30 p.m. and we are meeting in the multipurpose room of West Valley City Hall. We have all members present virtually or in person. So we have Councilman Hardman. Oh, we're not going to have everybody. Sorry, reading out of a place. So Councilman Harmon is virtually, Councilman Norfelt, Councilman Christensen, Councilman Whetstone, Councilman Hoon, and myself are here at the table, joined with Ms. Kamick, our city recorder, and then virtually we have Mr. Pyle, our city manager. And we will excuse Councilman Fitzsimmons. I will now turn the time to the council for the minutes of February 21st, 2023.
I move for approval of those minutes.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And they stand approved. Our regular meeting tonight, we do not have one. We didn't have any business from last week. So we will turn the time over to Chief Jacobs for resolution 23-17.
Good evening, Colleen Jacobs, Chief of Police. This is to, it's an interlocal agreement with the Salt Lake County Library to hire off-duty police officers to work security at the library.
Marshals Services.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. I know the other one comes up
I was
next.
looking at the wrong one. My bad.
Be your show for the next few minutes.
Anyways, I can wing it. This is an MOU with the Federal United States Marshal's Office. It's to be a part of their fugitive task force that we have worked cooperatively with them for the 26 years of my career. So the acronym they tend to use tends to change here and there, but it's all the same. They'll cross deputize one of our folks or several of our folks, and then they'll go out and do some fugitive apprehension. So this MOU is just to clarify expectations, and the change in October of 2021 when the feds allowed for the body worn camera. So prior to, our guys did not wear body worn cameras when they were with the marshals. Now they do.
Oh, okay.
Good news.
Yeah. So this person is just assigned out of their normal duties when they need their help, or are they assigned to them 24/7?
No, this is a collateral assignment, basically. It's usually our proactive street crimes folks that work with the marshal's office. So they'll do their normal street crimes duties with West Valley, and then they'll work overtime with the marshal's office on these fugitive apprehension projects.
So now I'm getting the two mixed up as the pay. So do we get overtime compensation? Or do we get compensation from the marshal's office? The library, I think was the numbers I have in my head.
I don't want to speak out of turn. I know we get overtime from some of our federal partnerships. My apologies.
No problem.
Let's see.
I don't see dollar amounts on either one of these.
Person.
So can you just research and just send us a quick email?
Yeah, it looks like we just do asset sharing with them. So any forfeiture that's done while we're with them, we'll receive a portion of that.
But we don't get paid.
It's
for
almost
their-
like, yeah, our guys do it as part of their assignment with us, but it's a collateral assignment with them. So it's part of their 40-hour week.
Okay. Okay, did anybody else have questions?
Just a quick question. The council may already know this, but I'm curious, do we have a cumulative list of these types of interactions that maybe take away, not take away, but in addition to regular duties of our officers? And does that put a strain on regular duties?
That's a very good question. We do have a list of all of the assignments that we have that are collateral as far as task force and that sort of thing. One of my requirements, and it's been a requirement mostly, I really put an emphasis on the requirement that I have a West Valley nexus. So these fugitives that they're trying to apprehend, they're either our fugitives or they've done something in our city and they're fugitives somewhere else. We really do make sure that there's a nexus with West Valley, whether it's with our DEA task force or our Marshals task force, our Attorney General's task force. There's always a nexus back to West Valley. So it may take away from their regular duties, but it's still the overall enforcement of crime in West Valley.
Still catching back.
But we're not out catching bad guys that did things in South Jordan. South Jordan assigns their police officers to do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, these are the types of fugitives that are really dangerous. So they'll take 8, 6, 12 guys and go apprehend these people. So, there's going to be operations that don't include fugitives from West Valley, but we make sure that there's enough of them that qualify for our time.
Okay. Okay, seeing no other questions, we'll move on to resolution 23-18, which is our interlocal agreement with the county at the library.
Okay, this is interlocal agreement with Salt Lake County Library. They want to hire police officers off duty to work security at the county library that's just over here. We're fine with them just doing our regular overtime way of doing business, but they insisted on having this interlocal agreement. So here we are requesting approval to accommodate them.
So this one will be overtime pay as well. And
Yes.
is it covered with the $51?
Yes,
And then for a supervisor, it was $61?
yes.
That really covers a
It will still go through our,
supervisor?
yeah, it'll still go through our regular overtime process. Just when we do overtime with other government agencies, we don't charge the administrative fee because the whole point of it is to not pass along the administrative fee to taxpayers.
Okay. So that's the one I had those numbers in my head, not the other.
Yeah,
Okay, Any questions?
West Valley branch, Hunter branch.
correct.
I noticed the agreement was January 1 of this year. Have we been doing that already, or is this prorated back to January 1?
We haven't been doing it yet. We've had this agreement with them on and off over the last couple of years. We didn't do it last year. They're requesting it again this year. They've been having additional challenges with unsheltered population. So they're requesting our presence to help address those issues.
okay. Seeing no other questions, thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, we now have our Mr. Bunderson going to talk to us about an International Olympic Committee guarantee letter.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Eric Bunderson, City Attorney. This is essentially a proclamation that would purport to be from the mayor, approved by the council, that basically tells the Olympic Committee, should the Olympics come here in 2030 or 2034, whatever the year is, that we are ready to have them. And the way that we're ready to have them is by security, health, and any other kind of administrative help that they need. That is, if they need certain ordinances passed for street vendors not selling Olympic paraphernalia or Olympic items in the streets and other things like that, advertising. We're just committing as a city to help the Olympic Committee in any way that they need us to in order to have the Olympics held here safely and securely from threats. The particular numbers and letters referenced in here are from an Olympic document like the GI 0.3, GI 0.5. My lawyers have vetted those and believe that we can legally meet all of those requirements. And so it is for the council at this point to decide if that's what we want to do. But the letter is legally sound, and we're able to sign off onto it if you want.
Hey, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Bunderson?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, we now have the authorization to purchase fire safety equipment at the Maverick Center, and we have Mr. Fupko online with us, and he will have the next two items. So the first one is resolution 2320, and there we go.
Hello, this is Jim Fuco with the Maverick Center. Let me get my video on. And these two budget requests are for an update to our fire alarm panel inside the building. It has not been upgraded or updated since the building was built. We've been working with the West Valley City Fire Department on the upgrade of the panel to take care of some issues that need to be taken care of. The decision was made to stay with the same brand that was put in the building when it was built and just upgrade the panel itself, keep all the peripheral equipment, and saves a significant amount of money versus ripping and replacing everything. We appreciate the time and effort that the West Valley Fire Department has provided through this whole process. So that is what the $60,503 purchase is for, is to go ahead and replace the fire panel and get us up to the most current version and something that should serve us well into the future. The funding would come through some legislative pass-through money through the state DGO office.
Okay, any questions about the fire upgrade? All right, do you want to tell us about the security equipment?
Okay, the security equipment, in today's day and age, it's becoming more and more critical that you not only see what's going on inside your building, you really need to keep an eye on what's going on outside the building, especially with the big investment the city has here. And in discussions with some of the city folk, we've decided that it's time to get camera systems in the parking lot that kind of cover the entire parking lot, the marquee, and all the outside parts of the building. This will help deter, hopefully, any crimes happening in the parking lot, help the police department maybe identify people they're looking for if they know that they've come through our parking lot. Plus, if something does happen in the parking lot, we're able to get a good view of what's going on. And this is kind of important going into the Olympics too, to have that additional security force on the outside of the building. So that's what this purchase would be for. Again, this will be funded through the Olympic set aside money that came through the legislature.
Okay, any questions?
DGO.
Can you explain what the DGO DFCM is?
Yes, it is money that the state legislators set aside through their, I think it's their division of finance. I don't know what the initials actually stand for. And Eric might be able to give us the acronym for it, but it's money that was set aside that's been given to the Olympic host cities that are going to be hosting events, to get them started on some upgrades and to put some money back into the facilities to get them ready for the Olympics. My understanding is there's going to be 3 different pieces of this. There's this piece, there's another piece coming out in July, and then next year there'll be a larger piece as long as the city goes through with the bid for the Olympics.
Okay, and Mr. Pyle may have had something to add there.
Yeah, ma'am, I just on the acronym there, DFCM is the Division of Facilities and Construction Management. And I actually have forgotten what DGO is, but I'll bet Nicole probably knows what it is.
Yes, Department of Governmental Operations.
There we go.
There we go.
Yeah, that was under them.
Or alphabet soup.
Yes, very much alphabet soup.
And it took 3 people to.
So how far out will these cameras go? Will they go to the far south end of the parking lot?
Well, there's going to be,
Okay, we'll turn the consent agenda over to Mr. Pyle. Were there any of these of special note?
Ma'am, there's 2 categories. One is an appointment to the PSRB, and that's Ms. Julene Jolly, who we have interviewed and we would like to recommend for that position. All the rest of them are for various temporary construction easements associated with the pavement replacement program. Nothing out of the usual unless Dan has any of them that are of note.
Okay. Mr. Johnson does not have any of special note. Okay, thank you so much.
Welcome.
Did anybody have any questions on the appointment? Her full bio was in the material provided for us. Okay, seeing nothing. We'll now turn the time over to Mr. Kirk Nord for our presentation for our doodle, or is there? Oh, okay. I'm like,
I was thought the more important people were gonna go first, so.
you are. That gives you all the,
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much for giving me some time here for a moment. I'm gonna see if I can pull up this presentation. Oh, there we go. Okay, good. Can we see this okay?
yes.
Oh, you have other puzzles. Yeah, so I'm here on behalf of Eric Dowdle. I don't know if many of you know who he is. He is a local Utah artist based out of Linden, Utah, and he has a very distinctive folk art style. We ran into Councilmember Christensen down at the Utah League of Cities and Towns conference last October and had a chance to meet with Wayne and give him kind of a rundown of what we're doing with Mr. Dowdle. And that's going to be the kind of the premise of our presentation today. We'll try to keep it short. Typically, our presentations take about 35 to 40 minutes. I know you don't have that much time, but we'll try to keep this short. But I kind of want to give you at least an idea of who Eric Dowdle is and why we are talking to the city about puzzles and about commissioning a potential art project with Eric Dowdle. So the idea is this: in 2026, America is going to be celebrating its sesquibicentennial anniversary, the 250th anniversary of America. And as part of that celebration, Eric Dowdle, Al Jackson, and a couple of other senators have decided to put together something called, I'm going to scroll to the very bottom here, a movement called Land That I Love. And Land That I Love is going to be a movement in 2026 that's going to go around and celebrate the fabric of America. And how we're going to do that is any community that commissions an original art piece with Eric Dowdle will be included in the Land That I Love celebration in 2026. That will feature a bunch, it'll have some touring dignitaries, it'll have some senators, they'll bring in some people from local and celebrate the community under the idea that the fabric of America there's no missing piece in the fabric of America, and each piece or each community represents a story that needs to be told. So what Eric does, we threw out a couple of his puzzles here. What he'll do is he'll go to communities and he will paint communities. And most of the times when he goes and does this, he just does it. He just goes, paints a community, turns it into a puzzle, and puts it out in the marketplace for people to buy. And the whole idea and the whole concept around a puzzle is this: when people go look at art, whether it's a sculpture, whether it's a painting, people today's day and age, people will spend maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes looking at it, absorbing it, trying to understand what the painting's about, talk about it, and then they'll move on. And as an artist, Eric was trying to figure out how can we get people to really experience the art, the stories that are in the art. And that's where he came up with the idea of puzzles. He's like, when you put a puzzle together, and I'm just giving you a narrative, but there was a video I wanted to show, but we just technologically couldn't do it. So I'm trying to give you the fast version of the narrative video. But really, when people are sitting around a table and they're putting a puzzle together of your community, for example, that gives them time to talk about the stories of West Valley City, or, the iconography, or the people, or the places, or the buildings that make your community special. And so when we approached Wayne about this and went through our original presentation, poor Wayne, he had to sit through the 45-minute version.
He's not here.
Yeah, he left. And he should, and well, he should have. You can only do this once. You can only stomach this once. But when we were talking to him, kind of giving and kind of laying out this vision, when we talked to Councilmember Christensen at Utah League of Cities and Towns, we kind of gave the idea of what we could do with the community. We could put all the stories of West Valley City into an original, authentic work of art, a one of one. He only makes one, and commission that with the community. And so, as we were talking, we were invited to come and give this presentation to you today to talk about what is possible with West Valley City, and also talk about some of the things that are probably on your mind, like costs and what's the benefit for the community. So we'll talk about that real quick. Before I jump into that, though, Eric Dowdle, he's sold over 500 million puzzles throughout the course of his career through his various vendors. Primarily, he has an exclusive with Walmart, exclusive with Costco. Disney is a big vendor for him, as well as Target. So, and one of the things we like to always joke about is there are months where he is actually bigger than milk, meaning his puzzles that are distributed in these Costco's, sometimes they beat milk in terms of buying. There more people buy puzzles than they buy milk in certain months. What I like about this is this, if West Valley City were to do a puzzle with Eric Dowdle, you'd have a wonderful piece of art hanging on your wall. You'd have some exclusivity. We'll talk about that briefly too. But what I really like about this is that people in Florida, New York, Massachusetts, wherever Costco's or retail outlets are that carry these puzzles they're going to go into their stores and they're going to go, West Valley City. What's that all about? And they're going to pick up the puzzle and they're going to look at it, and they may buy it, and they may learn a little bit about the history and what makes West Valley City tick. And I know there's a lot of stories this community has to share, both historical and current. If I'm not mistaken, I think this is the first or second fastest growing city in the state in the last 10 years. Somebody don't hold me to that. I mean, I believe that's the case, but maybe Mark, is that right?
I'm going to say one.
Mark, just go for it. Just say the fastest. Okay. So the idea is this, and obviously Eric is close by, but he would come if the city was to commission an original work of art with him. He would come into the city for a couple of days. He'd sit down and meet with you. He would meet with the business leaders and the people and the stories that you want him to tell, and he would listen to them and he would learn about them, and he would learn their unique stories and their presentations and who they are as people. And then he would go and he would start painting, and he would start painting those stories. So let me show you a very brief example of Pleasant Grove, what he did for Pleasant Grove City about a year and a half ago. Went into Pleasant Grove and he listened to them. And what they wanted to do with his painting is they wanted to commemorate the 100th anniversary of Strawberry Days, which is a local fall festival for them that happens every September. And so as you can see, just by his folk art style, he tried to incorporate a lot of strawberries into the painting, right? That was important to them. He's even good at people. And for people, for the mayor, this is actually the current sitting mayor and the city council of Pleasant Grove in this puzzle. And the idea is this, they painted this. The art is now on City Hall, on a wall in City Hall, and it's a legacy piece. It's going to be there for 10, 20, 30 years. And it's going to tell the story of Pleasant Grove as of 2021, both current and historical. In the puzzles that are here on the tables, what I just wanted to point out real quick is this, in each puzzle, they have an insert. And what happens is when you open the box, start putting the puzzle together, there's an insert there that will actually go and tell the story of the community. That's how people learn about what it is, who you are as a community. It has a blurb, it has a little summary on the top, and then it actually identifies different aspects of the image that you can learn about it for the community. Real brief, I wanted to show this as well because this is an example of a 501c3 commissioned piece. Morro Bay, California didn't have the funds as a city to commission the art, so they actually went to a 501c3, had them commission the piece, and then worked with the commissioning entity to create this. Just an example of a city commission piece and a 501c3 commission piece. So there's different ways to do this, depending on funding. So let's talk briefly about how it works. Let's actually just jump right to cost and we can talk about how it works. So to commission an original piece of art with Eric Dowdle, it costs $75,000. And this is what you get for $75,000. You get a one-of-one original art piece. It's a 32 inch by 40 inch, which is about the size of what Andy, my wife, is going to show you here. It's a 32 by 40 framed original, one of a kind, one of one. The commissioning entity, whether that's the city or a 501c3, gets to keep this. They can auction it off. They can hold on to it for legacy purposes. They can do whatever they want with it. In addition to that, we will also do something called an unveiling day. An unveiling day is where Eric and all of our staff will come and actually unveil the original work of art and have a big celebration around the missing pieces concept that I talk about. There will be food, there will be dancing, there will be music. And we just did one with Tooele last weekend. Over 1,000 people showed up. And it was an awesome, awesome, awesome event. There's a lot of community pride. And what's cool about it is people will actually come up and they will take little puzzle pieces of their story and they will go up and put their story and talk about their story briefly. Some people can be long-winded, but they'll talk briefly about their story in front of their peers and their friends. And it's really, really cool. So you get an original piece of art, you get an unveiling day, you get another large clay canvas print of the image, and you also get a perpetual license to the image forever. So think of it not only as a piece of art and a good way to tell a story, but it's also a great marketing piece for the city. Because for about 12 months, the city is going to get to sell anything with that image on it they want, and all the revenues will go to the city. Eric gets none of it. No royalties on the back end, none of that, either during the exclusivity period or afterwards. But then after the exclusivity period is up and he starts putting your puzzle into his distribution channels, you can still sell your puzzle at suggested retail. There's a lot of ways we can talk about that. If there are, and I'm just giving you the short version. If there are additional questions, be happy to talk through things with email. But the idea is $75,000 for the art, a license to use the image in perpetuity, and an unveiling day and an event that's tied preferably to, a festival of some kind. And then the other $75,000 we ask for is a puzzle commitment. So with a city the size of West Valley City, 6,000 puzzles is very, very, in our opinion, very, very easy to go through. Just to give you an example, Tooele just burned through 1,000 at the unveiling day, and they sold out, and only about half the line was still waiting for puzzles. We bet low and sold out of all of our puzzles before everybody got a chance to buy one. So they're a lot smaller community than you guys, and they bought 6,000, and they're committed to sell out the 6,000. The reason why I bring up 6,000 is this. If you have 6,000 puzzles, you sell them at suggested retail, at $24.99, it pays for the project. The project pays for itself. And that's the idea we go into this. We don't want this to be a sunk cost to the community. In fact, we're pretty bullish on the fact that we're pretty sure that you're not going to break even, but you may even make some money. And I know that for some communities, that's not the goal. But what I'm saying is with this project, if you front the money up front, it comes back to you, and it'll come back to you for a long time through not only dollars, but also through the marketing perpetually in the future. You know, the last thing I'm going to do, just in the interest of time, there's a lot more we could talk about. I know a lot of you have seen this deck, but I'd like to just share a 2.5-minute video of the Tooele unveiling event. So you get, at least get an idea of what an unveiling event kind of looks like. And I think I'll close with that unless there are questions from you guys that you guys would ask.
Well, and they did have Tooele on the news the other night with this. Yeah, so if you were watching the news, you've already seen it.
Does anybody not want to watch the video? 'Cause I'm okay with that too, but
You might not be exactly what the news station was. But that's why I kind of already had an idea. It was really cool.
and I apologize, I can't put it on the big screen, but I'll try to put it on this one. So hopefully at least
Yep.
you around the table can watch it. I'm gonna do this from above, so I hope. Oh, boy. See if I can get the- let me go just- get this here real quick.
So can you do that and talk at the same time?
I sure can.
Okay,
That's
so
'cause you guys are, you guys have questions, far away.
so you have a 100, a 500 and a 1,000.
That is correct.
Okay,
Yes,
so
and
you can have all sizes.
that's right. Yes. So when you commit, when the city commissions the artwork, that's, we talk through all that. We want so many puzzles of this, we want so many of this.
Okay.
We can totally accommodate any request there. All right. That's the Tooele puzzle. So if anybody wants the Tooele puzzle, the only place they can get it is Tooele, right? For the next year or so, which is great. So, and that's what's kind of fun is there are people who are part of the community who will obviously feel a kinship towards something like this. But there are also followers of the Dowdle puzzles that just like to go around and buy the newest and the greatest. And there will be a lot of people looking for that as well. So anyways, thank you for giving me a few minutes of time. I hope I didn't go over too far. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to take them now.
Questions from anybody?
Not a question, just a comment. We purchased 5 of these about 3 weeks ago at the travel show, and so I've had one of these on my table for the last 3 weeks. They're fun.
So what city did you get?
We got a Salt Lake City, Ketchikan, Sitka, New York, and I don't remember the other one. Just places we've been.
That's cool. And as you're putting the puzzles together, you're kind of talking a little bit about maybe,
Remembering things where we visited while
Yeah.
in the city. you know.
Yeah. That's kind of the idea. I mean, you want people to get to know West Valley City. we put a lot of money into tourism dollars and things of that nature and trying to get the word out for why people should come and spend money in this town. Why you should come and visit West Valley City. This is a great way to do that. It's a great way to get people outside the state. Everybody in the state knows West Valley City. Very impressed with West Valley City, especially what's happened in the last 10 years. A lot of people outside of the state probably don't know much about West Valley City. They just assume it's part of Salt Lake. So there's a way to differentiate outside the state and get people kind of give people an idea of what you as a city has to offer. So I like that. Any other questions?
So does this tell, I mean, are all the puzzles finished off the exact same size, or is the 100 like this big and the 500 this big and the,
They're all the same. They're all the same size.
these have a really big piece?
Yes. If they're 100 pieces, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
The best size is probably 500, but I mean, that usually takes you about 3 or 4 hours to put together 500 piece with 2 or 3 people.
Because we have put together the Salt Lake one a few years ago, and it
Nice.
was fun.
Very nice.
So then once we saw it within the city, then he just puts it out in all the Costco's and then you can get them easily.
That's right. Yep. So the city would, whoever commissions it, whether it's the city or a 501c3 would have exclusive rights to sell all the puzzles they want. They could put it on t-shirts, they could put it on hats, they could put the image on anything they wanted to promote the city or sell memorabilia or things like that. But after that 12 months is up, then it would go into his channels. And the idea on that is that he would probably put them in retail channels that are not germane to Utah. So they're kind of farther away. So it still gives West Valley City in this situation, the opportunity to continue to sell the West Valley City puzzle. But if you want to put it on a t-shirt or a hat, or if, let's say 5 years from now, you wanted to use the image to put it on a banner, something like that, you can. There's no royalties, there's no additional costs, no fees. The only thing that Eric asks is if you do anything like that, he just gets to do what's called a color check. So he just wants to make sure that the colors that are showing up in the puzzle are exactly the way they show up on the hat or the t-shirt or the mug, or whatever it is you put it on. But other than that, that's his only requirement. So
Sorry, this is gonna be 20 questions. So you buy so say we say, okay, we're gonna do the 6,000.
Yeah.
And we sell them out in a week and a half. So we need another 6,000.
Sure.
And another 6,000.
Yeah.
You just keep pushing them in there.
we will do that. The reason why we start with 6 is because it takes about 6 to 8 weeks to get the next tranche in.
Okay.
So we start with 6,000. Hey, you're getting down to 1,500. You're starting to go low. Hey, then we do it that way. But yeah, the answer is yes.
And you can keep ordering them for 5 years or just the first year?
The city can keep ordering them at wholesale cost. Oh, we took it down. $12.50.
Okay.
Then you can sell them for whatever you want.
Okay.
Suggested retail is $24.99, but if you want some for 30, if you want some for 20, doesn't matter. It's up to you.
Okay.
Yep. And then the other thing too is that, he also has other items that you can put the image on and sell them as either part of your initial exclusivity period, or he can do, or you can do something where you want to like maybe auction things off or donate things away. You can do that as well.
Okay.
Anybody else?
I don't see Scott have any questions. Anybody around at the table?
You've been a great audience. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
All right, well, now turn the time over to Mr. Schertz with our legislative update.
It's empty.
How many days left?
Great. Who's counting? Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, members of the council, for a little bit of time. I'm actually gonna invite Dave Stewart up as well. Dave's contract lobbyist for West Valley City. He's been working with me on a host of issues, so wanted to make sure we acknowledged his contribution to the effort this year up at Capitol Hill as we kind of come to an end on this thing. Few days left, as I mentioned. Budget's almost done. They have their final executive appropriations committee meeting on Thursday, where they will approve final budget considerations. A couple of things of note as it relates to the budget considerations for West Valley City. We were successful in getting funding for enhanced enforcement on Bangerter, as well as Mount View corridor that will be coming through the highway patrol. So that funding mechanism did go through. Additionally, in the area of transportation, I won't go into all of the kind of gritty details, but they did restructure some debt in transportation funding, which is going to allow them to expedite certain projects that are in the Transportation Investment Fund, to include many of the interchanges that are on Bangor Highway. So that was specifically mentioned in some of the intent language as well. Still working on the details with UDOT to determine what acceleration means. But they did kind of free up some additional dollars for some of that work that they'll be doing there as well. So those are two fairly significant budget items that will have implications in West Valley. The last piece, and Eric touched on this a little bit in his presentation, there was 40 million additional dollars set aside for Olympic venues, which West Valley City through the Maverick Center will be able to avail itself of as well. So that was prioritized in the funding items that were approved last Friday and will be kind of finalized this week on Thursday. Budget will be adopted likely Thursday evening. We try and get that done before Friday. Oftentimes it does spill over into Friday, but the hope is we can get that done by Thursday night for you as well. A couple of other issues that I know we've talked about in the past as it relates to this group is the subdivisions bill. This was the bill that we've been working very closely with Steve Pastrick and his team on to make sure the changes in the way in which we address subdivisions within the city and within cities generally isn't going to have any sort of negative impacts in West Valley City. And as we've reviewed that legislation, there have been some minor tweaks along the way. It still seems consistent with the way in which West Valley City is handling its process. So from that standpoint, I don't see any sort of negative consequences related to the legislation as it's making its way through the session. And our current process seems to align fairly closely with what the legislature's intent is with that piece of legislation. There was a new bill that did come out this week, sponsored by Senator McKay, that deals with the DIDs. You may have heard of this. This is a development improvement district, more of the alphabet soup, which would allow developers to create essentially a taxing district around their development. And within that taxing district, they could impose a property tax levy that would be utilized to underwrite the improvements. The big distinction between this and PIDs is PIDs have to be approved by the city. In order to create one of these districts, the local government actually has to endorse and promote the PID at such time they can create the taxing district. Under this legislation, the taxing district can actually be created by the developer. That bill did get out of committee today. We have been working along with many of our stakeholders and partners, including the League of Cities and Towns and others, to make sure that we are defeating that piece of legislation. And it does look like it's going to have a tough road to hoe. So we'll keep you apprised if anything changes on that. But I think kind of all hands on deck on pushing back on this last piece of legislation that came out with 4 days left in the session. So I do think is just a kind of directionally what we need to be thinking about is the development community is very interested in this tool. I think they showed their hand this year at the legislature. So I would anticipate this will be something that we'll be addressing over the interim and going into the 2024 session. So just something for us to keep our eye on as we move into 2024. Last piece I want to talk about, and the reason I brought Dave up is to talk a little bit about the homelessness issue that we mentioned at the last council meeting. So Dave and I had the opportunity to meet with Wayne Niederhauser earlier this week on a couple of different occasions to discuss the strategy that we discussed at our last council meeting, which was, just to remind everybody, if we were to voluntarily take a temporary shelter with restrictions in place in terms of how that would function and the number of individuals that would be included, could we get some sort of legal protection either by way of statute or by contract that would allow us to essentially remove ourselves from consideration on any sort of permanent shelter? In that conversation, Wayne did mention to us that he is interested in the concept, would like to sit down with us and work through some of those details. In terms of timing, he said, to be honest with you, at this point, the way the bill is moving forward, I don't think we need to make any sort of obligation between West Valley City and the Office of Homeless Services right now. But if we were to move down that track, we would have a contractual agreement with West Valley City, both on the operational aspects of any temporary seasonal shelter that would operate in West Valley City. And within that contract, have provisions that would protect you against a permanent shelter moving forward. What is currently in the bill is a provision that says if you do become the home of a temporary shelter, for lack of a better term, without your consent, you cannot get another shelter until 2026. So that language is currently in the bill. I think based on our conversation, the last council meeting, there was some discussion of probably having more robust protections than just a protection until 2026. We mentioned that to Wayne, and he suggested to us that he'd be willing to have those conversations if he could avoid having to go through another comm process and just work directly with West Valley. So with that in mind, Dave, anything that you want to add as it relates to that?
Yeah, the only thing I added, one clarification as well, at least maybe if I misunderstood this, is the 2026 date, as well as the site where the temporary shelter is, could not be transitioned into a permanent shelter. What it didn't do though is prohibit anywhere in the city, but wherever that facility is, it is not, it's not allowed to be a permanent shelter, if I remember right. And so he kind of made that point, but I think kind of the implication was where that is, probably that community kind of has certainly a leg up as far as they're looking for ideal sites. He had lamented, he had found one he thought worked perfectly, but apparently there's some deed restrictions that prohibited it, but there, obviously he's ideally would find something somewhere that, works for both, but in the bill itself, that is kind of the carrot or stick or whatever you want to call it, depending, but it does allow that, but doesn't, again, preclude the city. But I think to Lincoln's point, working contractually creates the opportunity to kind of work through nuances beyond the statute and allow some flexibility there.
So that is a little bit of deviation from where we kind of landed at the last council meeting, where we wanted most of our protections to be included in statute. With Wayne coming back and saying, if I can commit to contractual protections, is that sufficient for West Valley? We wanted to get a little bit of a gut check from you as to whether or not that works. Again, they're not statutory, but I think the contractual obligation and the spirit of where Wayne Niederhauser is coming on this issue is in the spirit of trying to work with us and find something that would give us some protections for a considerable amount of time moving forward. So Mayor wanted to get a little feedback from the council on that element. There were a couple other elements that we talked about as well, which is what they're calling the code blue provisions. This is under extreme conditions when they would restrict or limit a municipality's ability to enforce some of its ordinances around camping and homeless encampments. In addition, it has provisions that kind of suggest and require public entities to consider opening their doors to allow these individuals to come in during these very extreme conditions. Through the work of the League of Cities and Towns and us, we have been successful in kind of mitigating some of those concerns that were in the original draft. First and foremost, one of the provisions said that you can enforce many of your ordinances around homelessness 2 days before the announcement of a code blue. Well, the dilemma with that is you don't know there's going to be one until they announce one. And so having a provision that says you can't enforce ordinances to something that hasn't been announced seemed problematic. We've addressed that issue. We've also addressed the issue of temperature. So in the original bill, it was at 30 degrees. That's been lowered to 15 degrees. And kind of astutely, folks had pointed out that we need to determine where we're going to measure the temperature that affects the community. That will be addressed in rule. And the reason this is important, and I think the kind of most extreme example is right now it's probably below 15 degrees in Alta, whereas it's 40 degrees in West Valley City. And so where you measure temperature is going to be an important consideration as to how we implement Code Blue. That would be all handled through the rulemaking process, but I think everyone kind of acknowledges there needs to be a more granular approach to how we're addressing that issue. And then lastly, as it relates to the enforcement of ordinances, still working on some language, but everyone kind of acknowledges the ability or the need to have municipalities continue to enforce their ordinances around homelessness, mainly camping ordinances. I think the goal and what we're working on language on is don't go take someone's blanket if they're using it to stay warm, which I don't think would ever be our intent. But at the same token, if someone is posing a health, safety, or welfare risk within the community because of their encampment, we do still need the ability to work with those individuals to either get them to shelter or address what would be the public health and safety concern that we've got. Working on some tweaks to that language as well. There should be an additional sub coming out when it's considered in the Senate, and we should have all that language kind of buttoned up as it relates to West Valley City. And we've been working with the departments on suggested language for that as well. So last piece, all that rambling, is to just get a little bit more clarity from the council on if we can agree with Wayne Niederhauser to do some sort of contractual consideration of a temporary shelter. Is that sufficient for the council? If so, I don't think any of this happens during the legislative session. His intent is to work with us after the close of the legislative session to see if we're still a willing party, and if so, work through the terms of what that contract would look like. I just don't want to continue to suggest that if the contractual framework is not sufficient to give you the protections that you're looking for. So would love any feedback you have. And Dave, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Okay. From the council, anything?
I hate to be a naysayer, but contracts are a lot easier to break than statutes.
Statute, yeah, that's what I'm thinking as well.
Maybe it's 12 years I served on the council, maybe a little more negative at times. More than maybe the 24 years I served in public education. See what happens after each legislation.
Yeah, I mean, I will speak up for Wayne, and I think he's got fairly decent intentions to work with us and would not want to be overly burdensome. And I think is certainly appreciative of kind of directionally where we're at least willing to head. I think the contract's going to be as good as we draft it, right? And if we can put some terms in there that make it very difficult for them to break the contract, or penalties. I mean, I think there's a host of ways in which we can kind of bolster our position, but you're right. Legislature only meets 45 days a year. They've got to go back through that process to change statute, whereas in a contract, there would likely be out provisions that we would have to make sure are pretty well buttoned up within that contract.
Well, and for myself, I witnessed them changing the rules every year anyway. I mean, so I almost think, in my brain, I can't decide if a contract would be better because the statute, the legislation can say, okay, well, you guys had it this year. We appreciate that, but we're going to change the statute so that you have to have it. And even if we had it changed in statute, I don't know that it would hold long enough for us. So contract might, but Eric would probably know legally better than I. Which one would be the strongest to go with?
That's kind of my gut too.
Okay. So, anybody else?
Yeah, right.
And then, so this, if we fell on the sword for this, COM wouldn't have to do their thing this year? Or will COM still have to find somewhere for, because this would take care of 23, 24. Somebody would have to still do 24, 25.
Yeah, and so in talking with Wayne, I think that was kind of his suggestion is let the bill move through that has the com process still in legislation.
Okay.
We could then work offline with him. Obviously, if we came to terms that were comfortable for both parties, we could kind of abbreviate the com process by just saying, we've agreed to be a host for X period of time. And that would kind of reduce the workload, obviously, of the com process. I think they'd pretty willingly suggest that they don't have to meet regularly to go through that process if we come up with something that works.
And then Mill Creek, is there plan to have one built by 26? Or are they still wavering on whether or not to do that?
Well, and Dave, I'd love your kind of recollection of this piece of it as well. So he did mention to us that they are in pretty long discussions with Sandy City on what's called an MPV shelter, which would be the or MVP, the most vulnerable population. So these are folks who have disabilities or seniors on locating a shelter in Sandy City and working collaboratively with Sandy City on a permanent MPV shelter. They are currently working with Mill Creek on a shelter within Mill Creek City that would kind of be, I'll call it a permanent seasonal shelter. So
Okay.
it would not be a year-round shelter, but a permanent seasonal shelter.
But they still bus them or van them in and vet them out?
Correct. Yeah, that it would be kind of a regional shelter that would kind of mirror what they're doing currently, but it would be a permanent location to
Okay.
handle the seasonal population. And then last piece, which was a little, I guess, insider baseball, is there are a couple spots within Salt Lake City that they're looking for the permanent shelter. Those are not as far down the track in terms of the negotiations with Salt Lake. And to be candid, the main thrust behind this legislation isn't dealing with Salt Lake County. It's dealing with bringing Davis County and Utah County into the mix on how do we have kind of this regional shelter approach, wherein they have some skin in the game as well. And so I think that's where Wayne is definitely saying, as the bill relates, I know Salt Lake County cities are going to focus a lot on Salt Lake County. But really the main thrust for him is trying to see if there are other shelter locations to disperse this population where we can locate something either on a permanent or temporary basis in both Utah and Davis counties. Now, not a shocker, I think, to anybody that they're quite concerned in both Davis and Utah County about getting added to this club. But that is kind of directionally where he's trying to take this, recognizing that when you look at the regional population, we've got to do something in Utah and Davis County. We can't continue to bus that population into Salt Lake County for all these services. So yes, I think there will be some emphasis to mainly deal with seasonal work here in Salt Lake County, but I think most of his efforts in the coming year or two are going to be figuring out shelter locations in Davis and Utah County.
You did very well with the Davis County people. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor.
I really appreciated last Thursday.
I was
Oh.
texting Nicole during that whole conversation, kind of,
Painful.
I don't want to say laughing, but it was, the irony was rich, hearing folks talk about the amount of effort they put into homelessness and not getting credit for it, as we've been saying that for the better part of 6 years. So it was a welcome addition to the narrative that we've been talking about for
Yeah,
quite some time.
that was enlightening. Anyway.
Yeah.
So the other part, when Dave was saying that, or one of you, to open up other facilities, this is going to allow churches to open up during the blue zone and rec centers, any private people that wanted to, kind of, that helps facilitate that, correct?
Yeah, so the goal is to have obviously the nonprofit community as well as the religious communities and public sector open facilities. There was actually a provision in the bill that kind of said anyone could and wouldn't have to have a specific license in order to handle this population. I think recognizing that poses a pretty significant code enforcement issue, that they're going to be pulling that back to be namely nonprofit organizations, public entities, as well as religious organizations opening on those fronts.
Okay,
Not necessarily the guy in your neighborhood saying, come on in, you can stay for a few hours.
okay.
Yes, small. Yeah.
Molly's like our expert on,
Hi,
let's mess everything.
I'm Molly. I'm with the Utah League of Cities and Towns. Some feedback we got today as well was that for Code Blue, the intent is that that entire plan is established at the county level through COM. So essentially by the end of the COM process, it's not just that any church will be able to open. It will be, our plan is for, the Lutheran church in Salt Lake and the Methodist church in Midvale, to kind of know where that is. So it won't necessarily, at least from my understanding right now, be that everyone can throw their doors open. This is our strategic plan for how these needs will be met throughout the county.
Okay. Because Salt Lake has already had a church open up, haven't they?
They have, but part of that, this language is because that's technically illegal, what's going
Okay.
on in the church right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's all we've got, Mayor. Happy to answer any questions about this. Obviously, I know this is kind of top of mind for everyone, or any other issue that you're wanting us to track legislatively.
Yep. Any questions? Okay,
Awesome.
thank you. Good
In
job.
terms of the final report, we'll be pulling together a final report for the council kind of immediately following the session. We'll have the written report out to the council on all bills that we're tracking on your behalf for you to digest as well. And then we'll have a follow-up verbal report as well. So thanks for the trust that you have of me and Dave and the team. Certainly appreciate that. Hopefully you felt like it was a good session. I know oftentimes cities are on the defense, not necessarily the offense. So thanks again for your trust in me and Dave as we pursue your interests up there.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mayor.
All right, we have the council calendar. Did anybody have any concerns? Okay. Potential future agenda items. Yes, Mr. Pyle. We still can't hear you. You're not unmuted.
Sorry, I forget to
There we
do that
go.
at least once a meeting. Sorry about that. We became aware of an emergency construction project need last night, or I did, through Dan Johnson. And normally if this happened during the week, I'd be texting you or emailing you and letting you know what was going on with it. But because it was on Monday night, we knew council meeting was coming up the next night. We thought we'd take a couple of moments and potential future agenda items to go over that. So I'm going to turn a few minutes over to Dan Johnson right now, if you don't mind, Mayor, if that's okay.
That'd be great. Thank you. What did you break, Dan?
Oh, my goodness. You'll find out.
Okay.
So we've got we have a storm drain on Toulouse Street that we became aware of a problem last fall. Of this home on Toulouse Street that just had water seeping into the basement. And so we explore it. The complaint comes in on a dry day. It's been weeks without rain, and we're scratching our heads trying to figure out what's going on. So after a lot of work and investigation, we think we know what the problem is. There's a in the storm drain, this is a low point in the street and it collects the storm drain water from this subdivision that was built in 1973. And so this is an old corrugated metal pipe that discharges into the South Jordan Canal that runs along the backside of those properties. And the way that it ties in, the pipe actually comes in below the water level. So the pipe's always full of water and it's corrugated metal. And if I've ever spoken to you about corrugated metal, it's not waterproof and it's
So the stormwater drain is always below water in the
canal.
canal. It
Yes, it
doesn't
is.
drop down in.
It does
So
not
if
drop
you're
down
gonna
in.
Keep
So
it backflowed in there.
it's submerged. Yep. So there's always water. So what we suspect is that pipe just is full. And for whatever reason, we've never had a problem in 50 years, but now we do. And so, the water has seeped into the basement. And so our original plan last fall was to have our own crews replace this pipe. You can see the little jogs in the pipe. It's quite interesting to dig into this stuff. And I think what happened was in 1973, I think they put the pipe in the wrong place. And when the house came, they had to move the pipe around the house. And so after exploring that and existing utilities, we realized we don't want to stay there. We really need to get that storm drain away. Another piece of this thing that's fun is there is a storm drain pipe that was installed after the subdivision came in the late 70s, but it actually dead ends right before Bangor. It does not tie into anything. So we think that they had intentions of fixing a problem, went west and couldn't make it past the Jordan Aqueduct. And so it literally goes nowhere. And so this thing is full of water.
So is it capped?
No, it's open. It's just full of water all the time. And
So is it at a higher elevation than down here?
the pipe is a lower elevation here
It's
than
lower.
it is here. So here's our solution that we decided. This is why we're doing it now instead of last fall. And the emergency is that we now have permits and a design and everything else. And the canal water comes back first part of April. So we need to get this thing rolling. This is Orleans Way. All of these homes have been purchased and demolished by UDOT, including this home. So our plan now is to put a storm drain box here and run a storm drain parallel with that east property line and then tie into the canal right here with the caveat that we're actually working with UDOT for a long-term solution to get out of the canal completely and get into a Bangor storm drainage system. And so what we're asking of the council now is authorization to execute a contract using the city's emergency procurement procedures, which does not necessarily follow all of the bidding requirements we normally do. We reached out to several contractors to find somebody that has the capacity and the availability to meet our schedule. And we struggled a little bit, but Cody Ecker Construction is a company that we've worked with quite a bit. And they have the capability and the willingness to help us to solve this problem before our April 1st deadline. And so we're requesting that the council authorize the city to use that the emergency procurement code to contract with Cody Ecker for their bid is approximately $80,000 to replace that pipe, to put a new pipe in here. Yeah, so Mayor, you had a question?
So are you just gonna cap it in front of that house and not have it go through the side yard anymore?
So we, with our own forces, we're gonna remove this piece here. So from the canal,
Nothing will come back.
yep, we'll pull all that stuff out and then we'll block it off
Cap it there.
behind the curb. So that we'll remove pipe to some extent.
Are you gonna remove the pipe out of their side yard or
I
just
don't
leave it
think
not?
we are. I
Okay.
think we're gonna leave it. And we're planning on just capping it and then blocking off the
Downhill.
end. Yeah,
Brilliant.
which leaves us potential liability. We may have to go mess with it later if it collapses and causes her landscaping problems, but there's with her gas line, power line and communication lines are all underground in about a 5-foot
On that side
area
of the
that are
house.
really hard to deal with. Yeah, same side. So we prefer not to go there.
Yeah.
But that's my report. And if there's any questions, I'll happily answer them.
Sorry, I asked them all as you went.
So to meet your construction schedule, we have to pass the resolution or whatever we need.
Yeah.
next week.
Yep, we'll have a resolution. So what my intent is that next Tuesday, you'll have an item on the study agenda that you could potentially skip unless you have more questions. And then you'll also have an item on the regular meeting that will authorize the city to contract with Kodiak Construction.
And this should satisfy technically the study session, but we'll have it there next week if anybody has more questions.
Sure. Yeah, and so I can't say with certainty that this pipe is the reason that she has water in her basement, but it seems like a logical, I don't know, seems like it could be part of it. And so we're hoping that we can mitigate her problems by taking care of this.
Did you run the camera down it?
Oh, yes.
And did it look like it was compromised?
No, the pipe isn't compromised. I mean, well, it is it's never collapsed,
Okay.
but it's got holes in it.
Holes in it.
And
Okay.
it's corrugated metal, and by nature, it's not
Okay.
watertight anyways.
So if it has a few holes, it's probably her problem. Well, thank you for jumping on it
Yep.
and being willing to solve her problem.
Well, it's been a fun challenge. And by fun, I don't mean fun. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other potential future agenda items? Okay.
We had the presentation tonight. Would that all come up on a future agenda or?
That's what I was trying to figure out. Do you want to talk about it now? Or do you want to wait for everybody? Well, just Jake's gone. We could have it a communication in the future. Or we can have it an agenda item. I'd rather talk about it and see if there's a willingness first.
Yeah,
So, but I don't mind.
but we could do that, next week. So
Yeah.
If there's a willingness to talk
Mhm.
in the study meeting, then we could draft the resolution or whatever we need.
Okay. Council reports. Okay, seeing none. So Mr. Pyle sent out a email today with all of the strategic plan discussion items. I would like a week to read through them. I guess it might have been last night, but it was past my bedtime. So does anybody else want to talk about it tonight, or are you good to wait a week and dive in? Okay. There was a lot of information. I started it and then I'm like, oh, never mind. Okay, so we'll start on those items next week. Is there a need for a closed session? Seeing none. Can we also put for a communication item? Well, I'll talk to you after about something for next week, possibly. Okay. Okay, so seeing nothing else, or we have one more motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye,
Aye.
and we stand adjourned.